Hi, everybody. I'm Therese Allen, and I'm here with my dear friends Marcus Brown and Patty Barr. They're going to help me tonight with our little podcast about biological rhythms, sleep, dreams, hypnosis, and psychoactive drugs. That's a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping, Brother John? Brother John. Morning bells are ringing. Morning bells are ringing. Morning bells are ringing. Morning bells are ringing.
Morning bells are ringing. Morning bells are ringing. Ding ding dong. Ding ding dong.
Yes, it's time to wake up. This leads us right into our discussion about our biological rhythms. And those are the rhythms that our bodies go through every day or week or year. Our bodies are kind of in tune with some outward time cues like a clock or a temperature and daylight, but some are within. And one of those is a circadian rhythm, and that's a rhythm that happens within our bodies about every 24 hours. Um, and it comes from the Latin for about, which is circa, and day, which is dies. Circadian rhythms are controlled by a biological clock in our brains, and it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that sends out hormones in response to changes in light and dark. The most important of these is melatonin. Melatonin is what helps you sleep when you get into a dark and comfortable and cool room. Um, and because the levels rise in that situation. Now, when light starts to come in and it starts to warm up, then melatonin drops and that helps you wake up. People can have some troubles if their internal rhythms are out of sync. Um, and that can be found in cases of, for instance, jet lag, when somebody has to cover a whole bunch of time zones in one sitting, or in people who have swing shifts or any kind of irregular shift work. Their body just it desynchronizes. It's internal desynchronization, and if they can't ever get back onto a regular schedule, then the body never has a chance to resynchronize, and so it can develop some serious health issues. There are some longer term cycles that can affect humans, things like the cycle of the seasons through the year. And for instance, women's monthly menstrual cycles, those are longer than a day, but they all have an effect on us. Okay. I'd like to move on now to the rhythms of sleep. Basically, there are 4 stages of sleep. And the first stage, like right when you're about ready to fall asleep and drop off into right on the edge of consciousness, is stage 1. And in that stage, your brain waves are small and irregular. After stage 1, of course, you move into stage 2, where your brain emits short, high peaked waves called sleep spindles. And in that stage, small noises aren't probably going to bother you too much. Moving on then into stage 3, that's a deep sleep where your brain emits delta waves, which are very slow waves with high peaks. Um, your breathing slows down and your pulse does too. And it would really take a loud noise or vigorous shaking to wake you. And I have to admit, I have slept through numerous thunderstorms that people have asked me about in the morning with did you hear that storm last night? And I'm not even aware it's been raining. So. But anyway, after you cycle through the down to stage 3, then you kind of begin your ascent back up. But before you're actually awake, you go into a very special part of the sleep cycle, and that's called rapid eye movement. And during that time, your blood pressure rises, your heart rate increases, and your breathing gets faster. Your eyes move really fast under your lids, and that's, of course, why we call it rapid eye movement or REM sleep. It's considered paradoxical sleep because the body is completely inactive, but the brain is very active, and vivid dreams might occur during that. Patty, you had something you were going to share about the sleep cycles.
Yes, I wear a Fitbit and I can look on the app and see what my sleep was for the night and the deep sleep, the rapid eye movement, and the light sleep. So I can tell how long I've slept in each one of those. It's really interesting.
Well, that's cool.
Pretty
That's
neat.
cool. Do you think that's it's able to tell that because of your pulse,
Probably,
your
yeah.
breathing? It
Mhm.
just kind of measures that.
It does, yeah.
Very cool. Well, sleep is just hugely important because it's a time when our body eliminates waste products and repairs cells, restores energy, and replenishes the immune system. There are two uh, sleep disorders that I want to just talk about briefly. One is sleep apnea, where the breathing actually stops for what can grow to be a pretty long period of time during sleep. And then uh, the other disorder is narcolepsy, and that's falling asleep, falling into a deep sleep very suddenly at any time during the day. Okay, so we'll move on now to dreams. And a couple of things about dreams is that nearly all people dream. Some even have lucid dreams, which are dreams in which they know that they're dreaming and even think that they can alter what happens in their dreams. I think that would be a little difficult, but dreams are important for us, and there are some different theories for why we dream. Um, Dreams are sometimes seen as being able to help us to deal with the problems that we're facing in life, help us find solutions. Another approach is the cognitive approach, which basically says your brain is simply doing what it does all day long, but it's less focused because there's less sensory input at that time. And then the last theory for why we dream is that dreams are simply interpreted brain activity. So our brains are firing neurons, and they're just trying to find some way of making sense of it, and that's called the activation synthesis theory. Was there something we wanted to share about dreams?
Well, I just would add, it makes sense to me that dreams are kind of a precursor to working through issues. I've found that oftentimes when I'm particularly troubled by something, I might dream something parallel to that same kind of issue in terms of working through it. So that makes perfect sense to me. It's sort of dreams as a sort of your brain working through particular problems.
All right, we're going to move on now to hypnosis. And hypnosis is a procedure in which the practitioner suggests changes in the subject's thoughts, sensations, feelings, or behavior. And Marcus, I know that you mentioned you had been to a hypnotist show at one point. So tell us briefly about it.
Sure. I've tried twice to be hypnotized, and the first time just really didn't happen at all. And the second time I thought I was pretty close, but there was something that kept pulling me back. And I suppose, in some ways I just wasn't very susceptible to sort of being taken under in that regard. But
well, funny that you mention that because of the things that people do agree about hypnosis about, one of them is that hypnosis really depends more on the person being hypnotized than on any great skill of the hypnotist himself or herself. A couple other things, just in case you were a little concerned, they pretty much agree that hypnotized people can't be forced to do something that is against their will or that they wouldn't do normally. So, just don't worry too much about that. And basically, that anything done under hypnosis could be done by the same person with the right amount of determination and the right incentive. Hypnosis, just to be very clear, it won't make your memory more accurate. It won't help you regress back to your births or to, previous lives or anything. So, but hypnotic suggestions have been used successfully to help people in many medical and psychological situations. Okay, our last area to talk about is consciousness altering drugs. And just to be clear, psychoactive drugs are ones that alter perception, mood, thinking, or behavior by interacting with the biochemistry of brain and body. There are basically 4 types of a conscious altering drug. Stimulants speed up activity in the central nervous system. And those would include nicotine, caffeine, meth, and ecstasy. Depressants slow down activity in the central nervous system, and those would include alcohol, tranquilizers, and barbiturates. Opiates relieve pain, and those would include morphine, methadone, heroin, codeine. And psychedelic drugs interrupt normal thought processes, and those would include LSD and mescaline. And just a couple of things about drugs. You can build up a tolerance where the more you use something, the more you need to use it to get a response. And then if you suddenly stop using a drug, you can suffer withdrawal, which could include some pretty severe symptoms, headaches, vomiting, nausea, all that kind of stuff. And individuals can have varying experiences of any of these kinds of drugs, depending on other things, including their experience. So if the first time they use something, they don't have such a good experience, but they keep trying it, that experience might get better, or vice versa. And their individual state of mind before taking the drug could affect their experience. The setting, the environment where they're using the drug could have an effect on how they respond to it. And their own mental state, their own mental expectations about what that drug is going to do to them can also affect their experience. So that's been a run through our module for this week. And I want to thank my friends again, Patty and Marcus, for being part of this. And now, since we started by waking you up, we're going to end with putting you to sleep. All right. Lullaby and good night, with roses bedight, with lilies bespread, his babies we bear. Close your eyes now and rest. May your slumber be blessed. Close your eyes now and rest. May your slumber be blessed. Good night.